You're listening to the A Bit From Within podcast with Felicia Marty. I'm sure that we've all heard some version of a quote that's like, you have to make room for what you want by clearing out what you don't want. And I thought that we would take a second to really speak to this process of making room for something new, because it's not an easy or simple thing to do. It's okay. It's okay that we put the wall up to protect ourselves, and it's okay to acknowledge that maybe there's some stuff there that we just need to sit with and feel. Hello there, and thank you so much for joining me today for a new episode of the A Bit From Within podcast. My name is Felicia. I'm your host, and if you don't know me, you should know that I am a self-care specialist as well as a certified astrologer. So on this podcast, you're going to get a lot of mindfulness tips. We talk a lot about resiliency, about what is really going on, trying to be as authentic as possible. And you'll also hear me weave in a lot of astrological context as to what's happening right now, just for a little bit of food for thought, just something to think about, kind of plant a little seed and see if it helps you throughout your journey this week. I am a really big believer that the little changes that we make from day to day, whether it's in our mind, in our routine, in our approach, whatever it is, little changes can lead to big shifts in our lives. And a lot of that begins from a place of awareness. So with that said, let's dive into today's episode. We are officially into that second week of January. I think we're started, maybe last week we shook off some of those like post-holiday kind of cobwebs, that feeling of kind of maybe slowing down or having our lives kind of flipped upside down. Hopefully you're feeling a little bit of that return to some kind of sense of normalcy in life. I know that I was feeling very desperate for that as the holidays were winding down, and I definitely took my Christmas stuff down earlier than normal. I usually feel like I am obligated to keep it up through January 6th, like the official 12 days of Christmas. But I just couldn't do that this year. I really felt compelled to get a move on just returning back to some kind of sense of normalcy. And to be honest, I found myself over this past week really struggling. I feel like I'm having a lot of my kind of wanting to control life tendencies and anxiety coming out. And so because of that, I'm just trying to gain control over everything in my house. And so part of that was taking down the Christmas stuff. I finally broke down and got an extra Christmas box to store things in. So we're now at 3 boxes plus like the bag that holds our Christmas tree for all of our Christmas stuff. And honestly, I'm glad we did it because I didn't have to cram stuff in the way that I was last year. And so that kind of fueled this just movement into cleaning and purging. And it's so interesting because it's such I guess I have a lot of complex feelings about the work that I've been doing. On one hand, I'm really proud of myself and I feel like it's really good timing. If you listen to my episode last week, I was talking about some of my favorite best practices for Mercury retrograde and how it's a good time to go back and review things. And so I have been doing a lot of that in this kind of cleaning, purging spree that I'm on. You know, it kind of started with Christmas and then I just wanted to get my house back into working order and then my office, and I'm going through this career transition right now. And so I had this big, huge stack of paper that it's just, it's kind of like in a catch-all place. It's like bills and receipts and just mail, like everything you can think of that gets printed out and put into your hands. This was where all of that stuff was. So I told myself that this Mercury retrograde before the 18th, that I was going to get to all of that stuff. And once I did, I felt so good about doing that I was like, and of course I needed a paper shredder for all of the important documents. And I just felt like, okay, it's time. It's time to go through everything, like everywhere that I had old stuff saved up from over the years. I just needed to like reorganize everything and purge stuff that was old and I didn't need anymore. And, life has been filled with so many changes over the past few years. It was just time to like readjust to all of that. And so I did a lot of that work. I started that work last week and kind of carried through the weekend, and then I kind of wrapped it up today. A little bit of energy that I had this morning. And today I found a lot of things from what felt like a different lifetime ago. I found these really, you keep things that you think you need. So in 2014, I had a really difficult and challenging relationship with a boss that I was working for. I was working for a small business, and it was one of the hardest experiences I've ever gone through in my life. It's hard to know what to say about that other than I was basically working in a really bad work environment with somebody who did not know how to run a business and was starting to kind of go off the deep end in how he was treating clients, and very much did not know how to work with people. And as I was as this was all kind of rapidly crashing down around literally all of my coworkers and the business and everything, I was also moving out of my apartment with my roommate. It was such a good chapter of life, and it felt like it all ended and kind of exploded all at once. As I say this, I'm feeling very curious about what was happening astrologically at that moment. I'm going to have to write myself a little note here to peek at that chart. This is all happening around Thanksgiving of 2014. And during this week leading up to this impending explosion that kind of happened, metaphorically, just in case that wasn't clear, there were some letters exchanged between me and this boss. Actually, he exchanged letters with me. I followed up in person with a mediator type person who would take notes on the conversation, and then he would follow back up with a letter. And then finally, the only letter he received from me was a letter of termination. And so anyway, I had kept all of these letters. At first I had kept them. I bought my own little binder for it and put them in this stuff in case it ever needed to come back for I don't know what I was thinking. I was very afraid of all of the what ifs that would happen after leaving a bad work environment. So I kept everything that I needed to. And now I'm sitting here, I found all of this stuff, and I'm like, this was 8 years ago. This feels like a lifetime ago. I mean, it really was like a lifetime ago. And I'm like, I don't need this anymore. There's no reason for me to keep this. This isn't a memory I want to keep. There's no ramifications that I will need to come back to this stuff. I need to let it go. And so that's just one example of some of the stuff that I found. I found tons of old journals, and I found this collection of poems. I used to be very into writing poetry. I found 60, 70 pages of the poems that I used to write. And I think that kind of cracked something open in me today, because all day, since then, I've been feeling as though there's just a little bit of an open wound. Maybe it's just something that's kind of cracking open inside of me. Maybe it's just a natural grief that comes when you're letting stuff go that you didn't even know you were still holding on to. But yeah, it's just kind of put a little bit of a different feeling on today. And I will say too that this weekend we had a full moon, and I don't know about you guys, but for me, I could not sleep this weekend with this full moon energy. That doesn't always happen for me. I would say since I've been tracking the lunar cycles for like 3 years now, I would say it's about 50% of full moons that I just cannot sleep. There just feels like there's this buzzing energy, and I felt that so much this weekend. So I didn't get a lot of sleep. And, sometimes I think as we look back at what is happening for us during certain cycles of our life, we can kind of put it into a greater context. What else is going on? Well, right now, I feel like my mind is just working very, very quickly. I feel like there's a lot I want to sort through, and there's a lot I want to make space for, and there's so much that I want to commit to, and this new opportunity of a new year that I'm trying to patiently look forward to. What is this year going to bring? And am I ready for the changes that I say that I want? And this has just been a really big thing on my mind and weighing on my heart, and also weighing on my to-do list. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about what does it mean to make space in our lives. That was my plan for today's episode. Of course, we'll see what actually comes out when we get to that part of the episode. But first, I do want to talk a little bit about what is happening astrologically right now. I felt kind of bad because last week I spent most of the time talking about the Mercury retrograde that we're going through right now, instead of really talking about this full moon that was coming up. So I did want to just touch on, just contextually, that this beginning to 2023, it is not off to this like race of new energy and new inspiration. We're starting out this year really slow, kind of this pulled back feeling. And I think that starting a year with a full moon is just aiding to that energy. Instead of beginning like we did 2022 with a new moon and there's like a lot of, okay, let's go for it, let's start things. Instead, it's like, oh my gosh, look at everything that is around us right now. Look at everything that is happening. And the full moon is like this huge flashlight coming down on us. Sometimes it is highlighting one very specific area of our life. Sometimes it's more like us with our flashlight saying like, what is it that we want to put our attention on right now, or what is it that we are excited to dig into or release or get rid of or celebrate. But a lot of the time the full moons have very, very much to do with kind of reaching that peak moment. And what usually begins to happen is right after that we enter this period where we go wind down. We move back into the darkness. And of course, this is a slow-ish process. It takes 2 weeks. But there's usually this moment of surrender that has to happen. This feeling of like a bit of a turning point. So this is something that I hope that you keep in mind as we continue to move towards the new moon that is happening on January 21st. And I hope you remember to keep packing patience in your bag, so to speak, because we've got a bunch of kind of big astrological transitions happening before this. We've got Mars retrograde ending after a 2-month retrograde period. It's been retrograde since actually the end of October. So this has been a very, very unusual transit. And this is finally coming to, well, not a complete end, but at least the backwards portion is coming to an end. And now it's going to be moving direct again for the next 26 months. So it's going to be a really big speed change, specifically around the projects that we have, the things that we put our passion into, the things we need to take action on. That's going to start moving a lot faster. And then a week later, on January 18th, Mercury moves direct again. So it's kind of catching up. And again, things are going to start speeding up quite a bit. And we're going to notice improvements in communication and coordination. So things are going to be looking up. But the reason I say to pack some patience with you, especially over this next week, is because when there's a lot of movement in the planets like this, it just takes a toll on us. And where it really kicks up a lot of energy is in our own ability to become frustrated by not being in control of things or by things not going how we expected. So if you can be patient with this process and not allow yourself to go to that place where you're just kind of pissed off, obviously you'll feel a lot better. But I will say, if you can't help it, if you are feeling irritated or frustrated or just generally kind of bothered and annoyed, I think one of the biggest things that you can give yourself right now is extra space. And I know that that's hard to do. It's hard to do when you feel, I'm struggling with this right now. I'm struggling to take space because I feel so like life is so out of my control right now that I just want to find grip on anything that I can. So I really, really get it. But taking space is going to be the only way that you can plug into what's really going on for you. And from that space, hopefully you can crack open self-compassion and you can really understand that you are deserving of love right now and that everything is okay. You can kind of give yourself some comfort. You can build yourself up a little bit. You can comfort yourself kind of as you cope through the things that don't feel like they're working how you want them to right now. And that's the best way that you can treat yourself, right? That it truly, truly is. But you have to make room to be able to do that work. And you have to remember that you deserve to get that from yourself. It's so easy to want to seek that from other people, but a great place to start is to know that you are worthy of that and to give it to yourself. And I will say, it's still a great time while we are moving with all this retrograde energy to really take a close look at the places that your heart is being pulled right now, especially as you kind of look out into like the horizon of 2023. What do you need? What themes are coming up for you? What goals do you have in mind? What do you want to create more of in your life? This is an excellent time to do some of that like recon work for yourself. So that way you kind of have a clear vision as we move towards that new moon here in the next 2 weeks. And of course, next week on the podcast, I'll be talking more about the Aquarius new moon. But for now, I feel like that's enough to work on, right? Patience right now, self-compassion, that's where it's at right now. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about making room for new. So I'm sure that we've all heard some version of a quote that's like, you have to make room for what you want by clearing out what you don't want. And so obviously this topic has been heavy on my mind as I've been purging all of these little areas of my life. And I thought that we would take a second to really speak to this process of making room for something new. Because it's not an easy or simple thing to do. Of course, a couple times a year, I like to go through my closet, and every time I do this work, I think, I'm making room for something new. I'm making room for something new. And we can do this in any area, right? Like, I'm a Virgo rising, so I tend to go to the organizational piece a lot, and talking about practical, tangible things that are not maybe working optimally that I can physically do something about it. I like this work because it's very easy for me to see progress in these things. And I think that's why some of us are drawn to doing the actual physical purging stuff. But I will say that on the other hand of that, the idea of getting rid of things can be extremely overwhelming and very and highly emotional, because there are so many attachments that are made to things and to the things that we've gathered. In fact, oh my gosh, I just finished one of the most wonderful books. This is a total side tangent, but it's relevant in a way. I am such a huge fan of the author, Sarah Addison Allen. She writes the most beautiful, amazing characters, such creative and heartwarming stories. They're all a mixture of, it's fiction with just a little bit of like magical realism weaved in with incredible characters. And she just published a book last fall called Other Birds. And I had been waiting to savor it. And so I thought, this is going to be the first book that I read this new year. And so I made space to read it. And oh my gosh, it was such a joy. And without spoiling any part of the book, but there's a character who has for years and years and years just collected things and so many boxes. I mean, we're definitely talking hoarder level, but specifically paper. Like picture like boxes filled with like junk mail and records and not like listening records, but like paper records of things, like things that don't even have to do with her, like building records and city records. Like she just has these stacked in every single square inch of her house, just from floor to ceiling, books I'm not books. Well, some books, but mostly boxes filled with paper. And so I was thinking a lot about what compels somebody to want to hold on to things so much. And it's very simple when we think about it, because especially when we've been hurt, especially when there's a wound, we often want to fill up that space or comfort ourselves by holding on to something. One, it's another way where we can feel like we can do something about it. And then having something that we can hold close to ourselves, it can kind of create this false illusion that we're protected by something, or that we have a sense of security in something that could be, I mean, in those boxes, probably nothing valuable. But in other ways, we think, well, I've got these things. If I was ever in a pinch, I could barter them. I could trade them. I have assets, right? And I think for many of us, we have this idea, there's this underlying fear that there will not be more where that comes from. And of course, we don't want to be wasteful either. I mean, I think most of us don't want to be wasteful. So we feel a lot of pressure to keep things in case we need it again one day. Like, I can't tell you how many things that are in my house that I hadn't touched for like over a year, that as I was like, okay, I'm going to get rid of this, there was this little part of me that's like, but what if you need it? What if you regret not having this? Like, I'm talking about silly things like 6th and 7th bottles of shampoo and conditioner, right? And I thought to myself, Felicia, if you have these things, they're a brand you don't really like, there's a reason you stopped using this brand, you've only kept it in case of an emergency, right? And then I thought, I had to really challenge myself on that. Have I ever had a shampoo emergency in recent time, or ever? I haven't. There's never been a time where I couldn't, throw a hat on and go to the grocery store and get more shampoo or conditioner. And so I conquered that mental crises. But then there's the second part that comes up of like, well, you're being so wasteful. You should really use these first. And then I had to kind of challenge that part of my mental process by being like, but I'm not using it. And again, there were reasons that I stopped using these products. And I am really trying to invest in products that don't mess with my hormonal health, both in like my beauty products, my makeup, our cleaning products, things like that. It's a process that I haven't been able to do, overnight, just take everything and change it. It's something I'm trying to not let it be so overwhelming and try to know what I'm trying to move towards. So that was one of the things that I did, is I just was like, that's okay. I'm going to get rid of some of this stuff. It's okay. But we will make up so many reasons to hold on to things. And I think it's okay. It's okay to feel that. Some of this stuff stirs up very much like first chakra issues around safety, around having enough, around having resources, around having stability in our life, but having roots, having enough things. So one of the things that I feel really strongly sharing is that when you're making room for new stuff by getting rid of the things you don't need anymore, whether it's your physical space, or whether it's your emotional space, whether maybe it's cutting ties with friends or changing careers or doing whatever kind of work that feels like letting go of things to you. It is okay for it to hurt. It is okay to grieve. And it is okay to sit in that feeling of loss. I'm not saying you're going to want to do that. I don't think it's something that many of us want. And yet it is such an important part of the process. And I think that's kind of maybe that's the difference that I've been feeling today, that thing that kind of cracked open inside of me. To be honest, it's very easy for me to snap into this mental space of just executing the work, right? Just throw this out, clean this out, get rid of this, make this space, clean these things up. I can kind of just go into this mode where I just do. And I don't always make room for the feeling part of it. And what usually ends up happening is that sometime in the short period after that, I'll end up taking out emotion on something else. I'll thread it into a fight with a family member, or a day where the emotions just get to be overwhelming, or something like that, and that probably shows, a crack of my own emotional immaturity. But also, truthfully, it shows my humanity. It's very easy when it comes to the big, tough stuff for us to put up internal boundaries so that we try to protect ourselves from feeling the bad things. So, one, it's okay. And I'm trying to tell myself that right now, and I'm sharing that with you too. It's okay. It's okay that we put the wall up to protect ourselves, and it's okay to acknowledge that maybe there's some stuff there that we just need to sit with and feel. And two, I think it's very important for us to acknowledge, and this is true with this subject, but this is also true of anything that you're working on right now, is what is the result that you really are craving? Because that changes things. Right now, I feel like I'm on the edge of a really huge change in my life. I feel like I'm on just like a huge, huge precipice of something different. Like my heart is about to crack open into a space that I've never been in before. And there's a lot that goes with that. It's a huge career change. I'm hoping that at some point, God willing, I can become a mother. I'm hoping that Dave and I are able to take the next steps and get married. These are some of those things that I feel are close and that I don't have timing for, which is hard for me because I want to have control over what and when is going to happen. And I don't have those facts. I don't know that that's going to happen. For me, one of the reasons that the things that's in our way of moving forward is Dave's health issues, which is something that we're still having to deal with. So there's a place of me sitting in that pain of that. There's something I've wanted so badly to get ready to move forward to, and I'm so sad that that is a real challenge for us. And not that I'm even simply just putting that on Dave. I think the closer that all of this has gotten, that I am making space for that to be able to happen. You know, I'm significantly reducing the amount of work that I'm doing for myself. There was seriously so much that goes into running your own business the way that I was running a business. As I find myself starting to close this chapter and make space for it to happen, you know, the more scared that I get. Let's be honest about it. I am really scared of that. You know, it's all of those what ifs. What if it doesn't happen? What if Dave doesn't get better? What if it does happen? What if we get married? What if it doesn't work out? What if I can't have kids? What if I have kids and I don't like my kids? What if I have kids and I'm a bad mother? You know, like there are so many what ifs when you are on the edge of something new, that it can make it very, very understandable why you might want to run back to what you knew and what you've known. And for me, as I look back at my own history, I feel like there's a fear there around the new that I have always carried so strongly with me. I mean, most of this anyway, is very, very subconscious. We don't do most of this intentionally. But I feel like I've always kept little doors open to the past in case I needed it. You know, it's kind of like keeping those letters from my old boss, like in case I needed the proof or whatever, I had it. And so we're doing the work. I'm doing the work right now of just, truthfully, what it comes down to is I have no control over what will be. I have intentions. I know what I'd like to experience, whether I'm afraid to or not. And I need to do the work of making room for all of that. And I've started that work. I'm going to continue that work. And it is hard and it is scary and it brings up big emotions, and that is okay. And if you are thinking about this too, if you are already started, or if this has you thinking like maybe there's some spaces in your life that you might want to make a little bit of room for something new, I guess my best advice on that is take it one step at a time. Let one thing lead to the next thing, and be very aware of how you're feeling during that process. This is a place where you have to be very wise, because it's very easy to quit something that feels uncomfortable or that feels overwhelming or boring or stressful. Because I tell you what, like lugging boxes of old stuff around or having to load it up in your car and make a stop off at the, Goodwill or a recycle place or wherever, adding more to your plate is hard. It is overwhelming. But what will the gain be? And is it worth doing anyway? And I think this is where you have to find that wisdom, because you're going to bump up against parts that are very uncomfortable. And there are some places where you should push and get yourself through it. And then there are some parts of this work where you need to be able to walk away for a little while. And of course, this is going to very much depend on what you are purging and getting rid of and working through. But I do think that there are reasonable moments to temporarily pause and be able to walk away and sit with it. And this is challenging, because most of us don't have space in our weekly lives for ongoing projects. I mean, at least that's something I kind of struggle with, is I kind of move through life with this philosophy of like, if I don't get to it and finish it right now, when am I actually going to come back to this? But So I guess make space to come back to it. You have to have that commitment, because the last thing that you want is to start going through something, have it out somewhere like in a big open space or on a table you use a lot, and not be able to keep doing that work and just have it sitting out there, right? So I guess in that way, take it one step at a time and take it in chunks that you can actually do. If you don't have the bandwidth to lug, all of those old magazines, out of your house into a recycling place, start stacking 2 at a time. Every time you go downstairs, or once a week, just put a couple at a time into your car, and then make it a goal for, March to drop it off. That's a reasonable way of approaching that, right? I'm very interested in being able to look at things from a fresh perspective and being able to challenge the places in our lives that we feel big no's, or this isn't possible, or I can't, and say, well, you can, maybe we just need to look at it differently. And like I think I mentioned earlier, knowing your why is everything. It makes the work different. When I think about all of the places that I'm hoping to put more energy into for myself this year, so much of it has to do around healing, around my body, around my hormones, around my insulin, around my mental health, around my happiness, around trusting those vibes within me, that gut voice. In order to do this work, I have to be willing to do some of the things that are initially uncomfortable. But I know my why. And I think that knowing your why is everything. So if you're not sure what your why is, that's okay too. Honestly, it really is. Maybe you can make some room for knowing that why, and maybe uncovering some general areas where you have some space to make room. Maybe doing that work will help you understand your why, because even like consciously, you are making space for something new to come in. So with that, I hope that is giving you a little bit of inspiration for your week or for your month or even for this season ahead. Remember, sometimes we can just plant seeds in our minds. We might not be actually able to action them right away, but maybe this will settle somewhere inside of you and lead to something that will lead to the next thing that will lead to that big shift in your life. I hope that good things come out of this kind of movement or excavation if you start doing this work as well. As we close today's episode, let's do a card drawing. This card deck is this really cute little Namaste Stress Less cards. It's a new deck for me, but I thought this one is really calling to me today. So let's shuffle these cards. Gotta take them out of the box. Let's shuffle these cards and see how the universe wants to add to this conversation today. Sometimes this just doesn't feel real. Name your emotions. When we are passionate about an issue, we can become immersed in a feeling that we don't quite understand. Learn to name your emotions. This will help you understand what you are feeling. Getting to know what is driving you will allow you to connect with what you stand for. Instead of letting your passion and emotions take over your actions and thoughts, name your emotions so you will have more awareness of why you are feeling or acting a certain way. Well, it's all a part of the why. It's all a part of that awareness. What a beautiful reminder for us all. All right, you guys, with that, we will close today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you'd like to listen to this episode ad-free, you can do that through our Patreon page, which you'll also be supporting our work here, my work here at A Bit From Within. We have a few different levels of membership starting at $3 a month, which gets you ad-free episodes of the podcast, but as well as our unique lunar ritual guide each and every month. So that's for the new moon and the full moon. And then so much extra information. And then we have some other tiers that involve our meditation library, our yoga library, as well as live yoga classes with me. And I'm thinking of possibly introducing a book club to our community level, or maybe some kind of live meditation classes. There's a bunch of things that I'm kind of toying with. I'm not making any official decisions until we're out of this retrograde period. So you won't hear anything from me on that until at least the next new moon. But yes, that's just some of the thoughts I am kind of ping-ponging around in my mind. So yes, be sure to check that out. And thank you again for joining me today. And I will talk to you again next week.